Our next two guests are both lifelong activists. They've dedicated their time, energy, and efforts to raising awareness about animal welfare and the humane treatment of animals worldwide. Jan Creamer is the co-founder of UK-based Animal Defenders International. Her group has become a powerful force rescuing and protecting animals around the world. To date, they've been instrumental in securing bans on animal circuses in 20 countries. Here's a look at Jan and ADI at work.
He's probably going to die.
Probably going to die.
Come on, police! We're going to have to go in and crowbar this. Slashing the tyres. Don't let him open this cage.
No les creo, desgraciadamente, no les creo.
Stop that boy! Stop that boy! Get that boy! Stop it! Get that chain off him! You're not letting them out. Leave it. I don't care. You leave them where they are. No, you're not touching them. This is not a committee, so stop it.
Also joining us is actress Alexandra Paul, perhaps best known for her portrayal of lifeguard Stephanie Holden on the long-running TV show Baywatch. She also starred in more than 70 films, including American Flyers, Dragnet, and the cult classic Christine. When she isn't in front of the camera, she's advocating for a number of causes, including Animal Defenders International. Jan and Alexandra, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting us.
Well, Jan, I don't want to get on your wrong side because you look like you're a pretty tough cookie out there in the field, huh? What's it like to watch yourself up there?
It's such a shock. It's a bit strange seeing myself, but sometimes you just have to stand up to them.
I said lifelong activist, so take me down the path. We'll start with you, Alexandra. When did you first get this passion? Because here's my thought on this. Sometimes people read stuff in the newspaper and they say, wow, that's messed up. And then they put the newspaper down, they finish their coffee and they go on their merry way. But I know the two of you, that's messed up, I'm going to do something about it. So what is it inside that's, I guess, ignited that turns you into an activist? I mean, walk us through the path.
Well, there's no doubt that organizations like ADI are catalysts for people because you bring information that is hidden to people. And I grew up with animals. So I'm not an animal welfare person. Like you mentioned animal welfare in your introduction. I'm actually an animal rights person. I believe animals have rights and that they're individuals that are separate from me as a human and that I don't have the right to exploit them for entertainment and personally for eating or wearing. And so, but because we're talking about animals and entertainment, I think as a young person, I always felt that zoos and circuses were wrong. That it just wasn't where they were supposed to be. And even though everything looks happy in a circus, I think Jan can tell us a lot about what really goes on.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the things that struck myself and Tim about the use of animals in circuses. About 20 years or so ago, we started this campaign with undercover investigations. The key thing was people were going to these shows and you see the glitz and the glamour and it all looks very nice and the animals appear to like their trainers. They get them to perform movements which look like affection. But in fact, it means nothing to the animal. It's just going through motions. It's doing what it's told. And we really felt that we had to get behind the scenes and show people the truth. And that's really what's made such a difference. I mean, we've been campaigning for over 30 years on a range of issues. And with this one in particular, we felt that this was something which would resonate with the public.
Animal rights, animal welfare, you made the distinction. Do you make the distinction as well? I mean, is that a key distinction, those two words?
Yes, I mean, we're an animal rights organisation, but we also believe in good welfare. So quite often for us, the two do go together. But principally, it is about the relationship between human beings and the other species that share our planet. This is their home too. This is the only home they have. And we need to really look at how we relate to our neighbours on this planet. And I think as people have found out more and more about not only the intelligence of other species, but the fact that they have forms of culture, the fact that they have emotions, they're expressing emotions which we can now understand as we've studied them more and more in the world. I think people are seeing that there aren't so many differences between us and the other animals as we at first thought.
And they don't have a voice. I mean, that's key. The two of you recognize that, and that's a critical component of it too, right?
And they also, ADI, the movie that you've produced, that I know we'll talk about, but it shows, it shows the animals and not just as performers for humans. Animals don't have expression, so a lot of times we don't understand the suffering they go through because they don't smile or cry, and we have to remember that they are different from humans, and we shouldn't make them, anthropomorphize them like circuses do so much, like you talked about. They look happy in the circus, but that doesn't mean they're happy at all.
You take the viewers who watch the film on a journey to Bolivia. Set it up for us. What did you find, and how did it change things in Bolivia? And now you're doing something similar in Peru, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it started out with an undercover investigation. We rescued a chimpanzee from a circus in Chile in 2002, and that kind of prompted us to look at South American circuses in Central America. And so we did a 2-year undercover investigation all across South America. And once we launched those findings, we got bans in Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Paraguay, and lots of countries are now considering banning based on that evidence. And I think it goes back to what I said. We can educate people about the damage to the animals. We can talk to people about how they would feel if they were in the position of that animal. But getting the evidence has always been the most important thing that I see. I mean, we produce scientific evidence and legal evidence for governments, but it's the undercover evidence showing people what happens to animals when someone is in control of that animal and thinks no one is watching. That's the key. When we see how those people treat those animals behind the scenes, that's what changes minds.
When you peel back the curtain initially, I know you're smart enough to know it's going to be bad. Is it worse than you even imagined sometimes?
Sometimes it is. You know, that I've done a lot of undercover work myself, and there are some animals that stay with you forever. A monkey that I met in a laboratory many years ago, her name is Elisa, and she had bolts in her head, and she was being used in experiments to track the... she was being used because she had very human-like hands. She was of a species that have hands very like us, and she was being trained to use a computer so they could track which part of her brain was working. I mean, you meet animals like that, and there are lots of them along the road that you never forget, and there's always a space for you in your heart for those animals. In the film, you meet Colo Colo, and he's a male lion who was in a tiny cage, just about this big, for 12 years. And you see him in the film. He's in a rage. He's angry. He's absolutely terrified of people. Hates everyone who goes near him, and every time we tried to go near him with food, or we were using a broom or a pitchfork or something, he would throw himself at the cage. And you see in the film, you get to know Colo and how he's feeling. You start to understand his behaviors and how he's feeling, and you see his face change. And I think one of the key things at the end of the movie is you see Colo go free, and you can see a complete change in his face. His expression has changed, and as the veterinarian says at the time, that not only wasn't he in as much pain from being abused in the circus, and from he had broken teeth because they smash cats in the mouth is the first thing they do to discipline them, so they all have broken teeth. But also he wasn't in as much emotional pain. He wasn't in terror anymore. And I think if you see the two pictures of Colo together, his face when he was fearful and terrified and angry, and his face when he's at peace, I think everyone understands that expression.
Well, the funny thing is, before we started rolling on this, you were telling me, finally we have a film with the happy ending. So let's show a little bit of the happy ending, and then I want to talk to both of you about it. So let's take a look.
Yeah,
They're coming out fast.
Cola was scary.
Because he couldn't bear to have human beings near him.
His whole countenance has changed. His face has changed. He's not in pain anymore. And he's also not, I think, as in much emotional pain.
He kept his spirit.
What was that moment like?
It was amazing. It was a very emotional moment. And in fact, I could barely speak for the camera just to see someone in so much pain and so unhappy and watch him grow in confidence and then see him run free. It was an amazing moment.
Do you find a domino effect, though? I mean, if you can get one country to say, yes, this is wrong, then is it easier for the other dominoes to fall, or is it still going back at the starting gate, picking off a couple of legislators and it's building it over time?
Yeah, it's a mixture really, but certainly there is definitely a domino type effect around the world. We've got 27 bans now on animal circuses around the world, and the governments are starting to see that it can be done and that enforcement can also take place. One of the problems with a lot of the governments that we work with is that they want to pass a good, strong law, but then they don't know what they're going to do with the animals at the end of that. Well, okay, if we can't enforce it, then our law is going to appear worthless, and that's where we undertake to them that if they pass the law, we will help them with the animals, we'll relocate the animals for them. That's important.
I know you've been an outspoken opponent about animal testing. I mean, where does that stand now, and how do you get that mindset to change?
Well, the United States, in the United States, we tend to think we're so forward-thinking, but Europe and Israel and India, I think, too, have all banned testing on animals for cosmetics that have been tested on animals that are imported. That is against the law. Yeah. And am I missing anything else? Anything?
Basic safety testing and testing of the ingredients as well. I mean,
yes.
In Europe, we went in phases to the final ban, the marketing ban, which means you can't sell any products in the European Union that have been tested on animals.
These are cosmetics. And here in the United States, we haven't gotten that far. And now there's a real push to ban chemicals that are tested on animals and drugs that are tested on animals. And the biggest argument, logical and that makes sense for both animals and humans, is that testing drugs on another species is not predictive of human response, and that we need to start developing tests that, and we have for cosmetics, and why not then for drugs, that actually predict human response, because 92% of the drugs that worked in animals fail when they get to humans in the clinical trials. 92%. That is bad for the cost of drugs. It is bad for the consumers of drugs, and it's, of course, bad for all the animals whose lives have been suffering, and for naught.
Let's. I've got to do equal time. We showed some video of you. I want to show some pictures.
No, you certainly don't, because she's my hero.
I'm sorry.
So
I guide things on this show. Don't tell me how to do this show, okay? So I want to show you with the beagles. Talk to us about this project, because it's very close to your heart, just as the dogs are.
Yes, I fostered several beagles that were rescued from laboratories where they were tested. They were used for testing drugs, and that's Beckett and that's Javi. And the Beagle Freedom Project is an organization that basically gets these beagles from labs after they've been tested on, because normally the labs will just kill the beagles. And these are animals that have spent their entire lives in cages. When I got them, they were 4 and 6, and they'd never been basically outside. Didn't know how to negotiate stairs, leashes. They'd gone from cage to operating table, severe psychological distress, but they recover.
Wasn't it fun watching this wrestling match? I still got the pictures on, even though she said I couldn't, so there. I'm maintaining a little bit of control here.
Just a little. You got two strong women here.
I'm in trouble. Trust me. I've got 5 sisters. I know how tough this is. Let me ask you before we go about ag-gag laws. Explain what that is for our viewers, and talk to me how difficult that is for the two of you to do what you do.
I think the worst thing about the ag-gag laws is that it's the law giving cover to people who abuse animals. Basically, the laws are designed to prevent people undertaking undercover investigations. And we know that the way to change laws and to improve things for animals is to expose where they're suffering and where they're being brutalized.
And the law forbids any photography, even if you're hired into, or
and
if you've broken in.
This is in many U.S. states, right, that we're talking about. These laws have been passed.
They've been passed in several states. And there are some laws within the laws that seem like they're good. Like one of them is that within 24 hours of seeing animal abuse, you have to report it to the police. Now, this sounds like it makes sense, but it undercuts the long-term investigations that organizations like ADI do, where they have to get systemic abuse proof. So that they can show that there is widespread abuse. So these laws are very tricky.
So the key takeaway for our viewers, if you don't like that sort of thing, let your lawmakers know about it, I suspect.
Absolutely. And, you know, to tell their lawmakers that people have the right to know how their food is produced. We have the right to know everything that is done in our name. In terms of factory farming, of other uses of animals, we have the absolute right to know what is being done in our name, and people should have access to that information. If they're choosing to eat something, they should know how it's produced.
It's kind of weird that you can't photograph inside these. Doesn't that make anybody kind of nervous? It kind of that in itself, it does.
It does.
Well, let's leave with a laugh. Thank you both for coming in. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll meet a documentary filmmaker who risked his life to bring attention to the plight of the planet's last remaining mountain gorillas and the brave people who care for them in the Congo.